Well, the purpose of this video is to ease the transition from arithmetic to algebra and talk a little bit about what algebra is. And because there are some concepts that are different. Most of you viewing this have probably had some algebra in high school, and maybe it's been a long time. Maybe you were fuzzy about it, whatever. But let's take a look a little bit about particularly how it's kind of different from arithmetic. All right, and let's start with an arithmetic problem. Let's say I have 13 and I want to add 5 to it, so this would be the format for adding. We have the two things we're adding together. Here's our math operator and then our line, and this tells us that we want to put the answer down here, so we add the 5 and 3 and we get 8, and just bring down the 1. So we see that 5 and 13 is 18. Well, this gives us an intro to our first magic word in algebra, which is the word equation. So what is an equation? Well, first of all, it has to have an equal sign in it. So let's take a look at this guy. This is an equation. It doesn't look like an equation. It won't look like what we write it out when we see an equation, or what you might have seen before in algebra as an equation. And that's because most algebra textbooks, beginning algebra, just kind of dump you into the topic and start talking about algebra rules right off the bat. And this is where they lose a lot of students, I think, or confuse them in the beginning. Because algebra really isn't a different math from arithmetic. Arithmetic, applying the various operators, we know that we have adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. I'm using the keyboard symbols for those. And there are a few other operations that we can add to that list, like squaring a number, taking the square root of a number. Those are also math operations. But the four basic arithmetic operations, these still behave the same way. Arithmetic is kind of the language, if you will, of algebra. We're not really changing anything. We're just reformatting this to give us the ability to deal with equations. And typically that's called solving an equation. So that's another magic word, is solving. And I'll talk about what that is here in just a second. Okay, so what's this equation? Well, let's take our arithmetic problem and put it in a form that we would see more in algebra. We take the two values. We have 13 plus 5 equals 18. This is an equation. This is an equation. The only difference is this is vertical and it has a line here. This is horizontal and has two lines, the equal sign, the equal symbol. They mean the same thing. Matter of fact, if you take a bookkeeping course, you'll find that they use a double line when they want you to total stuff up, or they get a grand total. Okay, anyway, getting back to algebra. So all we've done is write it out horizontally. Well, why would we want to do that? Well, it turns out that in algebra, this idea of solving, well, didn't I just solve this? Yes. And what separates arithmetic from algebra is, what if we don't know what one of the players is? I got 13 plus some number equals 18. Well, you don't need any special processes, most likely, to solve that. You can solve that in your head. You know how to add things or whatever. But how did you get to that point? Start thinking a little bit out of the box. If I ask the question, what can I add to 13 to make 18? Think about how you got to your answer. Because 5, you've done enough arithmetic, you've got enough practice over the years doing arithmetic that you don't need to think about it too much. You know that you can add 5 and 3 is 8, that gives you 18. But let's say it was a little more complicated problem, maybe not so much easy to do in your head. How would you go about that? How would you go about that? What could I add to 13 to give me 18? Well, you might discover, I don't know, but I do know that if I subtract 13 from 18, I get 5. Oh, yeah, okay. 13 and 5, that gives me 18. So we're pretty sure that that's what this question mark is going to be. This is the key point right here. Being able to do this opposite operation. Okay. That's kind of the algebraic thinking process. And we're going to put it into more of a mechanical process. These are repeatable steps that you do over and over as you apply to any algebra problem that you're trying to solve. Well, let's get into this solving thing. This brings up another important point about algebra. And that is, instead of using a question mark, what algebra likes to do is algebra likes to stuff a letter in there. And one of the most favorite letters of everybody is X. X stands for the unknown. Why do we put a variable in there? I've had any number of beginning algebra students, hey, I know how to do this kind of problem. Okay, I've done these 100 times or millions of times or whatever. And now you're throwing letters. I don't know how to add X and 13. Well, either does algebra. It's not that we're adding this. You're going to discover that this process we call algebra, the steps that we're going to do, and that leads into why we write it out horizontally, because we write the steps one under the other. Here there weren't any steps. You just did the calculations in your head or with a calculator, depending on the complexity of the problem, and wrote your answer. That's all you had to do. Well, in solving an algebraic equation, we have to manipulate things. We have to move them around in a specific way to get us to this idea here. And we wind up at the bottom with X equaling some value, some number. This is when we know the equation is solved. So we have these number of steps that are in here that we do, and that's the reason for writing it out horizontal, because we want to keep track of these steps. Okay. And that's the reason for doing this X, why there's a X there. I always like to explain it in terms of being on a movie set. There's a lot of setup involved in getting ready to take a movie shot with a movie camera. And lighting has to be just right. The focus has to be just right. We're talking about movie being professionally done by a movie studio. And they will hire, the movie production company will hire a stand-in to sit in the place of where the actor is going to be. Typically, they don't want to waste the actor's time or whatever sitting in a hot set with hot lights bearing down, or maybe they're outside, doesn't matter. There's still a lot of steps to be done, to be accomplished before they're ready to actually pull the trigger on the camera and shoot the film. Okay, same thing in algebra. We need a stand-in. We don't bring it in until really the very end, when we find out actually what the number x is supposed to be. But since it's a mechanical process of moving things around, and the process is the application of our arithmetic functions here, we need something to kind of be in place to move stuff around, so we don't lose track of where it is in the equation, because we're changing the equation around. Okay, so hopefully that gives you the briefest of introductions. I think I'll do one more video on this, where we look at an equation more in depth and talk a little bit about what it is. But I wanted to explain to you how it really is similar to arithmetic. We still use arithmetic to get to answers. We just lay it out a little differently. And algebra is the process of going through these steps. That's really what it is, and it's why we need a letter. Hope that makes some sense to you. Okay, more in the next video.